From where I'm standing now, you can hear the sound of shooting and explosions.
This is a storm that has now claimed at least
Broadcaster, we are the leaders in global breaking news.
We start at Wimbledon.
Stand by for a moment of history.
The headlines keep breaking.
The Winter Olympics.
Now to cricket.
The Tour de France.
The Africa Cup of Nations.
A really tasty tie.
It's one of a kind.
This is Sport Today.
For all the latest results, headlines and analysis, Sport Today on BBC World News.
You're watching Impact with me, Tim Wilcox. The UN warns of growing evidence of war crimes in Ukraine and urges both sides to respect international law.
It is horrifying. Just the stories.
And the final day of campaigning in France, how will turnout affect the battle between Emmanuel Macron and Marine Le Pen? New clashes have broken out between Israeli police and Palestinian demonstrators. Welcome to the programme. As the bloody conflict in Ukraine enters its 9th week now, the UN Human Rights Office has described the war there as a horror story of violations against civilians. In the port city of Mariupol, pro-Russian fighters have been filmed near the destroyed iron and steel works, one of the last major strongholds of Ukrainian soldiers in the city, who are still trapped inside. Meanwhile, in the rest of the country, justified attacks along the whole eastern front, and were also trying to mount an offensive in the northeastern Kharkiv region. Our correspondent Dan Johnson has the latest.
Russian pictures claim only temporary. Russia also wants to show its Black Sea fleet still has deadly firepower, releasing these pictures of missiles being launched from one of its frigates. The defence of Mariupol still goes on.
Murdered, raped. And this is just continuing. It's just another day. The story has not changed at all.
There's more evidence of civilian deaths and mass graves in these satellite pictures, showing where 200
all military guys who's defending our country.
This holiday is very important because it means beginning of new things, it means resurrection, and in current context it's even more important. So it's
heard from them about the situation in the east in particular.
Well, the comment that 40 villages have been taken is absolutely true, but most of these were quite close to the front line, so there's been no major breakthrough on type 152 millimeter. And if they're going to actually push back and push the Russians back to the original 24 February line, then they're going to need the new 155 millimeter ammunition from America and Poland, and they'll go to the reception point in Poland where the defence forces will then pick them up. But there's got to be some training on most of them first. So there's going to be a couple of days, more maybe a week, even 2 weeks lag before those guns get to the infantry tactics. You know, mostly at night, I suspect, counterattacks at night. When they're proving much better at night than the Russians. But this is going to be a hell.
The figures are against them, aren't they? I think they're 3-1 Russian forces, as we saw around Kyiv, where they were able to use the forests and other ravines and things to camouflage themselves before striking against the tank convoys.
Yeah, I mean, the east is a big area, so there are places where it's much easier building up the forces at the moment, and where the defences are much thinner. More territorial, civilian type defence forces than regular army. So
do you think of NATO to push Russian forces back to that pre-February the 24th, the date, the start of this latest war? Because, of course, Russian forces or Russian-backed forces have been fighting and controlling areas of Donbass.
Push further than that. that Russia will then react in an even bigger and more coherent way than they are doing at the moment. But this is a real problem because if NATO only partially supports Ukraine, then there's a danger.
For Carlos Ghosn, he is the former boss of car maker Nissan, who is accused of funneling millions of dollars from Nissan's partner company Renault for personal use. It marks a new twist in the remarkable story that has turned one of the world's top businessmen into a fugitive. Ghosn was rearrested in Tokyo on the 4th of April 2019 over new charges of misappropriation of Nissan funds. Carlos Ghosn fled Japan to Lebanon via Turkey on the 30th of December by private jet, apparently hidden.
Sees that as a way of clearing his name. Now, Carlos Ghosn's case all along has been that the charges against him in Japan were motivated by a conspiracy in Nissan's senior management to prevent him arranging a merger between Renault in France, believes there is at least a case to answer, although Carlos Ghosn denies any wrongdoing. But it's unlikely he'll be going to France anytime soon because he's banned from leaving Lebanon. And that's because Japan still has an extradition request in place, not allowed to leave the country. So until that legal limbo is resolved, this is an interesting step, but it doesn't bring his trial in France any closer.
Just to be clear, he said that he wouldn't face a fair trial in Japan because they have a 99% conviction.
But he fled to Lebanon. He says he had no choice, that he was a victim in this case, but he does accept that there are outstanding charges against him and that at some point it would almost be a good thing for those to be heard in a court of law, and he would be very happy the alliance and pumped through a car dealership in Oman and ended up being used by companies related to the Ghosn family to do things like buy a luxury yacht in the British Virgin Islands. He denies all of this, and his lawyers of law, we won't know the outcome to that.
Our business correspondent Theo Leggett. Friday is the final stage of campaigning in France in the race for the presidency, which will be settled on Sunday, when millions of voters will choose between the incumbent Emmanuel Macron. Voters are still said to be undecided. Our correspondent in Paris, Hugh Schofield, gave us more information.
In 2017, if you remember, even going into the debate, the equivalent of the debate we just had, big abstention, and they're not sure how that will affect them. I mean, a big abstention might help Macron, oddly, because in the past it's been Le Pen's younger voters who've tended not to turn out. So a low turnout, no which way it would work either. So their message today, on this last day of campaign, as you say, is to get out and talk to the undecided, talk to that 8 million or so of French voters who voted for the far left candidate, Jean-Luc Mélenchon, 2 weeks ago, who are therefore, I'm not on the far right, I'm in the middle, so vote for me and you'll keep Le Pen out. Le Pen saying, there is a big anti-Macron feeling out there. You share that anti-Macron feeling, you left-wingers, so come on board with us, with a candidate who's shown herself in this campaign to be much more...
National Front's now National Rally Party. I just wonder how much love or affection there was for either of these candidates. I mean, one commentator I've been reading saying this was a battle between a narcissist and a fantasist.
Yes, and you see a lot of... and in this is a kind of rather resentful way, the success of the metropole, and they don't feel part of that. They loathe him, and there are people on the left who loathe him, and there are people on the right who loathe him, the far right, who loathe him. So there is an anti-Macron vote out there, and the comes across as being family-based, ordinary. Her life story is one full of ups and downs, very typical, so she has a big core support there, and even among people who don't necessarily vote for her, they have to admit.
Chill your dill. 300 million years ago, there was no Africa, Asia, Americas connecting those divided by distance, reversing millions of years of rifting, making far feel close. bringing there to here. Turkish Airlines.
Ousted from office earlier this month, has been holding large rallies, refusing to accept the new government, and he's demanding fresh elections. Secunda Kamani reports from Lahore.
Imran Khan might no longer be the Prime Minister here, but he's stating that he was ousted as the result of a US-led conspiracy targeting him, he says, because of his foreign policy decisions, including a recent trip to Moscow. And in doing so, he's really tapping into US officials. Imran Khan's opponents here dismiss those allegations. Most independent analysts that I've spoken to don't believe them either. They say Imran Khan is deliberately, they believe, exaggerating the contents of a diplomatic cable sent holding these big, large rallies. We'll have to see just what he can do to make them happen, because they aren't due to take place until next year.
Secunda Kamani. Authorities in Shanghai are taking new steps to contain a wave down for millions of people in the Chinese commercial hub of Shanghai. Here's our correspondent Robin Brandt.
As this lockdown, and it is a vast lockdown, approaches its fifth week, there is absolutely no sign that officials here are easing up. Homes taken to quarantine centres, while teams can go in and clean these areas. They believe that is one way to try and eradicate COVID from Shanghai. Now, we can make that assertion about people being removed because just a few days ago, the BBC will be taken to quarantine centres. That remains absolutely crucial. One other thing that shows you the level at which they are trying to enforce this strategy here is the announcement that now electronic magnetic alarms are going to be placed.
There's retaliation for the company's opposition to a new state law limiting discussion of the LGBT issues in schools.
For decades, Disney's Magic Kingdom in Florida has been able to rule itself, thanks to a special tax.
You look wonderful.
It's also allowed Disney to save millions in taxes and fees. But that's all come crashing down after a vote by state lawmakers.
70 yeas, 30 yeas.
The move is widely seen as retaliation for Disney's opposition to Florida's new education law, which opponents call Don't Say Gay. It bans school teachers from discussing anything related to sexual orientation, national and state organizations working to achieve that. Some experts argue the lawmakers' decision could hurt Floridians themselves.
For the citizens of Orange County, you're talking...
We're back in half an hour.
Hello there. Springtime thunderstorms across South Asia can be pretty violent, and that's what we've seen over the past week or so. Satellite picture reveals these thunderclouds which have been building the mid-40s as we move into next week. Into Central Asia, there's warmth building as well, but some showery bursts of rain. We've got this weather front which is spreading its way eastwards. That will bring a drop in temperature for the likes of Tashkent for a while this weekend, but the heat is very hot across northwest India. Temperatures at 42 degrees there in Nagpur on Saturday afternoon. As we drift towards the south here, we'll see the thunderclouds bubbling up. Southern India into perhaps the Maldives, certainly for Sri Lanka, and across this northeast corner, and they really will be quite violent. See the temperatures drop a little bit, so that front works its way through. And then it warms up into next week.
Chill your dill.
B-Mark mustard oil, mustard specialist द्वारा बनाया गया, करोड़ों द्वारा जांचा, परखा, आजमाया गया. The mustard specialist since 1933. बरसों से सरसों.
Inside the Resistance on BBC World News.
Hello, you're watching BBC World News. Our headlines. Warnings from the UN of growing evidence of war crimes in Ukraine. It's urging both sides to respect international law. More fierce fighting in the east as Russian military commanders declare their aim of taking the whole. Demonstrators at the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound in Jerusalem. Plenty more on all those stories on the website at bbc.com and also on our Facebook and Twitter pages as well. Those are the headlines here on BBC.
The Globe World Business Report.
Minutes. That's what I've got. I'll try a fascinating snapshot of all the latest in the world of business and money. Let's get cracking because the authorities in France, they have issued an international arrest warrant for Carlos Ghosn, of course, the former boss of the car maker Nissan. There he is right there. He's been accused of 2018 and charged with financial wrongdoing, but he fled to Lebanon hidden in a, well, music instrument box, didn't he? He previously described the Japanese justice system as being rigged, but people close to Mr. Ghosn have not ruled out he's going to France to face. They want a little bit of him as well.
That's right, Aaron. This is actually pretty bad news for Carlos Ghosn to face these kind of allegations or this arrest warrant. It was before easy to say that this was a Japanese conspiracy that he was in Japan. So it's much more difficult for him to now say that he's facing a victim of a conspiracy in one country alone.
Just in a nutshell, I mean, you said the accusations are similar to what the Japanese are after him for.
Spending it on things like a yacht, for example, is one of the classic examples of something that he is alleged to have bought through this rechanneling of money.
And Hans, you know, he said he fled Japan because he couldn't get a...
At the same time, they're saying now that the Lebanese authorities have basically put a travel ban on him. They're holding his passport. So that puts the whole question of whether he can travel into limbo. Either way, though, anytime he leaves the country, he faces...
Who says that he said this yesterday, that bigger interest rate hikes are on the table for the central bank's meeting in a few weeks' time. So what does that mean for the markets? Let's head straight over to New York and join our very own Samira. Happy Friday, Samira. We kind of know what it means for the markets, right? I mean,
Right. So if you look at the way that markets reacted on those comments, you know, the Dow closed 300 points lower on Thursday and markets opened about 6 minutes ago. And we're seeing that markets are already down again. And what the Fed, and in doing so, the Fed chair believes that moving quicker on raising interest rates is probably the best way to do it. It's certainly the most effective tool that the Federal Reserve has in its arsenal right now. And instead of even that it is, you know, now sort of going on with CNN Plus and their new owners of Discovery Channel, they didn't have a very good track record with any of these streaming services. And I think they got pretty skittish and weren't liking the numbers that they were seeing originally. So they decided to pull
that a full embargo on Russian oil and gas would end the war pretty much immediately. Pressure certainly has been mounting on European nations to stop buying Russian energy, but it's particularly challenging for the likes of Germany, which gets 40% of its gas from Russia. Well,
enormous. A part of our business is to transport and to store oil and oil products, and Russians targeted it deliberately. So we had huge Ukraine, and we operate basically all over Ukraine, and we provide, for example, heating for 90% of Ukrainians because natural gas is the source of energy for Ukrainians.
And Yuri, you've been incentive to stop the war and make sure that the transit routes are secure, but I've got to ask you this. Is it realistic to think that Germany would choose to make its gas supplies more vulnerable?
In general, we believe, and we're public about it, that there should be a full embargo, but it will, again, stop the war. But if they still get this Russian gas, they should be getting it through Ukraine, just to, first of all, show some solidarity with it. Also see how serious the West is to stop Russia from invading independent countries.
Check the show out. I got to go. Bye-bye.
Rebel, and I think that I don't think that it even was a rebel. I just am a creator, And I think when you spend 30 plus years doing wedding gowns, you sort of have to change it up a little bit. I just thought designer. I was a fashion insider who happened to design wedding dresses. So there were no rules for me. And I just said, you know what? I want girls to have a choice. If they want to wear a mini or they want to wear a bathing suit. It's not about that, it's about who they are.
A metropolis with an imperial past. And a wealth of cultures, religions, and ideas.
It all happened here in Vienna, the world city.
Vienna, empire.
Hello, I'm Isaac Fannin, and this is Sport Today, live from the BBC Sports Centre. Coming up on the programme, manager Ralph Rangnick. Stephen Curry gets hot to help the Golden State Warriors beat the Denver Nuggets and take a 3-0 series lead in the NBA playoffs. Great opportunity, one that he really wants to take. The 7-time Formula One world champion alongside tennis superstar Serena Williams are both thought to be willing to support the bid of potential new owner Martin Broughton. But we understand neither would have a say in...
I was like, wow, this is one of the greatest opportunities to be a part of something so great.
So let's get back onto the track now, because the first sprint race of the season will be held at Imola this weekend to decide the grid for Sunday's Emilia-Romagna the timesheets. Hamilton could only manage 18th. Qualifying to decide the grid for Saturday's sprint race gets underway in just over an hour's time. Now, could Paul Pogba have played his last match for Manchester United? The French midfielder has been...
I don't think that it is very likely that he will be able to play again.
Rangnick also confirmed that he hadn't spoken to Harry Maguire after the defender received a bomb threat, which led to the police sweeping his home.
This is
Liverpool manager Jurgen Klopp admits he would miss playing Everton next season if their local rivals were to get relegated. Heading into Sunday's Merseyside derby, Everton are just 1 point above the relegation zone after Burnley beat Southampton 2-0 on...
Are about the derby, so yes, of course I would.
The big three of Lionel Messi, Kylian Mbappe and Neymar all trained on Friday for Paris Saint-Germain ahead of their potentially season-defining match against Lens. BBC and says the war in his country has changed him forever. He's been stationed in the capital Kyiv, where his brother Vitaly is the mayor.
It changed women and men in our country, including me, obviously.
Nuggets 118-113 to take a 3-0 lead in the first round of the NBA Western Conference playoffs. Stephen Curry came off the bench to score 27 points and dish out 6 assists. And it was a good night too for Jordan Poole. That's a series sweep for the Dubs.
Came out of the gate really well. First lineup, executed pretty well. They made a run. We finished off the first half, with that 10-point lead. And we knew that they were going to come out with a punch in the second half, and that's what they did. And then how we were going to respond. I'm proud of the way that everybody played and competed.
Elsewhere, the Minnesota Timberwolves threw away a 26-point lead on Thursday to lose Game 3 at home against the Memphis Grizzlies, 104-95. Desmond Bane scoring 26 points and sinking 7 three-pointers. It is the third largest comeback in...
It comes back to just our chemistry and accountability and making sure that we're all on the same page. We're all clicking, we're all talking, the communicative piece. Just making sure we're always on the same page, no matter what we're doing, scheme-wise or anything, just make sure we're on the same page.
England's Jack Lisowski says he will wave a Ukrainian flag if he beats Neil Robertson at the World Snooker Championships, despite being told he couldn't pay tribute to the country. With his second, he dribbled past several England players from inside his own half before slotting the ball past Peter Shilton. The shirt has already met its reserve price of over $5 million, with the online auction due to close on May the 4th.
Globe and starting down under, some showers expected in Cairns, but in Sydney a nice day. Temperatures up to 21 degrees. Also some rain forecast for the south of China on Saturday. In Bangkok, hot sunshine at 35 degrees. and a hot Scandinavia. Rio will hot up to 34 degrees Celsius, Santiago at around 22, and looking at North America, the eastern seaboard doing pretty good, but plenty of weather there, northern plains and also into Canada. Some snow in the forecast. Bye-bye.
By Qatar Airways.
They are unafraid to address issues such as gender or politics, and very often the works test the boundaries of censorship.
There it is.
It's beautiful, beautiful, so enigmatic. A Neanderthal woman or man or...
The Travel Show, sponsored by Turkish Airlines.
Quite unsettling. Pre-pandemic, almost 2 million people came here every year, which put a strain on the site and led to it nearly losing its UNESCO heritage status in 2015. Experience.
It has always been a site evolving with the times. It has always been a site to experiment and to try out new approaches, both for the conservation and for the dialogue with those on the forum and the local authorities. But it's also the slaves and women who often do not appear in the same way in the written and official sources, and children.
To the elements, and climate change means the site is subject to sudden temperature changes, from extreme drought all the way to heavy rain. Today, new technologies are helping to preserve this invaluable record of Roman life on humidity, helping staff to act quickly if potential danger strikes. But the real star of the show is, without a doubt, this four-legged robot that bizarrely looks like a dog. Good dog.
The robot itself is able to avoid obstacles, to move autonomously in an environment like this one. And also, since you can upload artificial intelligence and machine learning algorithms on it, you can bring...
The authorities here in Pompeii are hoping for a successful tourist season in 2022, after being closed for almost 2 years.
You're watching Impact with me, Tim Wilcox. The UN warns of growing evidence of war crimes in Ukraine, and Carlos Ghosn, the disgraced former Renault-Nissan boss. Britain's Boris Johnson, on a visit to Delhi, signs a defence and security partnership with India. And the final day of campaigning in France. How will turnout affect violations against civilians? Both sides, it said, stand accused of tossing aside respect for international law. The UN monitoring mission in Ukraine has documented the unlawful killing of 50 civilians in Bucha, just northwest of Kyiv. Soldiers in the city were still strapped inside. Meanwhile, in the rest of the country, Russian forces are focusing on new offensives in the eastern region of Donbass, as well as southern Ukraine. A senior Russian military commander has declared...
Russian pictures claim to show rocket launchers firing on ammunition stores. Their forces took 40 villages in Ukraine's eastern regions yesterday, but intelligence assessments say they're
defying. Just the stories of people, children, women, men, elderly, getting murdered, raped, and this is just continuing.
It's not maybe that kind of celebration like we used to have in the past, but it's a time when we can be together with our family, with our parents, and pray not just...
is safe, and that peace this Easter will be hard to find. Dan Johnson, BBC News, Lviv.
Well, a little earlier I spoke to Alexei Goncharenko. He's a Ukrainian MP from Odessa. He's in contact with the...
Sorry, with Kiev, where they were already saying that they will be inside Kiev in 2 days. Then after this, they lost the battle at Kiev. So that's not true. There is no still victory in Mariupol, a stronghold, and Russians cannot just make something with this. That's the situation for them now. They are bombing the Azovstal. They are just using everything they have, but still they can't take it. Are inside the Azovstal, and they want them to be safe, and they are waiting for humanitarian corridors to save them from this danger which is coming from Russians. So what's going on there is because they are not giving humanitarian corridors for civilians.
Russia says that the troops inside the steel mill can surrender and will be given safe passage. Why won't they do that?
They don't want to surrender. And the whole world saw how Putin was saying for 1 year, we are not preparing attack against Ukraine. And then everybody saw what had happened. And like always, they are lying. And we know in 2014, Russia, Donbass, not far from Mariupol, that they can go, they can surrender. They did it, and they were killed in the corridor.
But
so that's something.
But isn't their situation hopeless? They are surrounded on all sides.
You maybe also remember this. And I've heard that now you showed to your viewers their reportage from Kiev, which is absolutely free, which has not failed, and Russians failed and retreated from Kiev.
Renault, for his personal use, marks a new twist in the remarkable story that has turned one of the world's top businessmen into a fugitive. Let's just remind ourselves of the saga. By 2017, Carlos Ghosn had made Renault Nissan. While out on bail, Carlos Ghosn was rearrested in Tokyo on the 4th of April 2019 over new charges of misappropriation of Nissan funds. He then fled Japan to Lebanon via Turkey on the 30th of December by private of Theo Leggett, and he told us more on whether France might be able to summon Ghosn, given that it doesn't have that treaty with Lebanon.
At the moment it looks unlikely, even though Carlos Ghosn himself says he would like to go to France and stand trial in France and put it under French control. So they were trying to get rid of him, and he says this was a politically motivated conspiracy. Despite that, investigations have been going on in France for several years now, based on information provided by Renault and Nissan. So
a trial in Japan because they have a 99% conviction rate there.
Absolutely. Once you've been charged in Japan, you're highly likely to be found guilty, and you can read all sorts of analyses of the Japanese judicial system to understand why. Some of them on the that he was a victim in this case, but he does accept that there are outstanding charges against him, and that at some point it would almost be a good thing for those to be heard in a court of law, and he would be very happy for that to happen in France. France, of course, does not extradite its own citizens. Appropriation of company funds. So the suggestion is that funds were siphoned from the sort of organising company of the Renault-Nissan-Mitsubishi alliance and pumped through a car dealership in Oman and ended up being used by companies related to
his rival Marine Le Pen. The two candidates faced each other on Wednesday night in a nationwide televised debate, after which many French voters are still said to be undecided. Let's just take you live to southwest France. Massive figures. I suppose the big question is, who is going to pick up those millions of votes for the far left candidate, and indeed the far fewer votes for the Socialists and Republicans in this second round?
It's difficult to answer this question, but I think neither of the two candidates will manage to get these votes, because of course Le Pen is not at all which has voted for Mélenchon. But Macron is no more popular. He was popular in 2017 because he was not who belong to racial minorities and who want to success and who can't success for many reasons, discriminations, etc. But Mélenchon, you know, is very popular with young people and in particular with suburban youth. And I can explain why if you want. But,
yeah, I just wondered also about the blue-collar working class vote as well, who perhaps traditionally would have gone for the Socialist Party.
You mean?
Yeah.
I mean, no, I don't think they will. They were still voting for this party, you know, the blue collar. Further, they vote. So it has been many years. You know, for many years they vote for the right wing, the far right party. So.
Eb Siftel, thank you very much indeed for joining us here on BBC News. Stay with us. Still to come, culture clash. Why lawmakers in the US state of Florida have stripped Disney of its self-government.
Connected world, all news is international. So, for in-depth analysis,
the impact on Europe and the rest of the world would be devastating.
And correspondents covering both home and global events, get a deeper understanding and find out what is really going on.
Countries are aiming to complete a bilateral free trade deal as well as a new initiative to tackle climate change. This is what they had to say.
The teams of both our countries are working on the free trade agreement. There has been conclude the FTA by the end of this year. In the last few months, we have concluded free trade agreements with the UAE and Australia. It is with the same...
On this visit alone, we've secured new deals worth £1 billion, creating more than 11,000 jobs, and perhaps most significantly of all, we're using our Brexit freedoms to reach a bilateral free trade agreement, and today prime consumers and increasing wages across the UK by as much as £3 billion.
Well, India is an ally of Russia and it hasn't imposed sanctions on Moscow. Here's our Delhi correspondent, Rajini Vaidyanathan.
Well, I think, as you mentioned there, India has a huge reliance on Russia and a long-standing partnership which goes back decades. But more specifically, the one thing that a lot of people talk about is the reliance that India has on Russia for military hardware, the lion's share. And so some of today was about trying to wean India off its dependence on Moscow for arms and actually look at other markets. And so that's where you've got the UK trying to find ways to make imports into India from the UK a lot easier. Said, though, that Prime Minister Johnson did not put pressure on India to change its neutral stance when it comes to Russia. That's quite interesting. But then we also heard from Prime Minister Johnson, who said that he did raise this with Mr. Modi. And I thought officials saying that the Indian government wants the violence to stop in Ukraine. But we don't even hear any much more from Prime Minister Modi. So it was interesting that Boris Johnson told us today a little bit more about Mr. Modi's position on this. But it's not going to change. India is likely to remain.
Netharajan explains from Base Camp.
This Everest Base Camp is full of activity with many of the support staff and other Sherpas fixing the tents and strengthening them so that the main climbers, when they come here, they're expecting more teams to come here for this expedition. But the war in Ukraine has also dented hopes because there is to be many climbers coming from Eastern Europe and Russia as well. Now, many of them here think that
it's turned into a feud now worthy of Tom and Jerry. Lawmakers have voted to strip Disney's theme parks of their self-governing status, a move widely seen as retaliation for the company's opposition to a new state law limiting discussion of LGBT.
Thanks to a special tax status, Disney has been able to build its own roads, control utilities, and even levy tax, essentially allowing the company to govern its own district in the Sunshine State.
I think sometimes issues rise up that you weren't aware of. Disney's charter allows them to build a nuclear power plant. And these are not things that may make a lot of sense.
The move is widely seen as retaliation for Disney's opposition to into law. Our goal as a company is for this law to be repealed by the legislature or struck down in the courts, and we remain committed to supporting the national and state organisations working to achieve that. They chose the wrong guy. All that's left now is for him to add his signature, and one of Disney's magical powers will vanish. Azadeh Moshiri, BBC News.
What would Mickey say?
Up across central southern areas and across into the northeast, some really powerful ones here, which have brought large hail, frequent lightning, some localised flooding. These dangerous storms are likely to continue into the weekend as well. Temperatures, meanwhile, will be really building across northern degrees there, Nagpur, on Saturday afternoon. As we drift towards the south here, we'll see the thunderclouds bubbling up, southern India into perhaps the Maldives, certainly for Sri Lanka, and across this northeast corner, and they really will be quite violent at times. For Mumbai, it's a sunny Tashkent. We'll see the temperatures drop a little bit, so that front works its way through, and then it warms up into next week.
Just one big supercontinent, Pangea. And today, there is still a force connecting those divided by distance, reversing millions of years of rifting, making far.
We start at Wimbledon.
Stand by for a moment of history.
The headlines keep breaking.
The Winter Olympics.
Now to cricket.
The Tour de France.
The Africa Cup of Nations.
The debate keeps raging.
They're still the team to beat.
England's batting is weak.
In Myanmar, we go inside the resistance, a people's army prepared to sacrifice everything to restore democracy. Our world, Myanmar, inside the resistance.
This is the 100 Women season on BBC World News.
War crimes in Ukraine, including the murder of at least 50 civilians during the Russian occupation of Bucha. A Russian general has said the offensive in Ukraine is aimed at conquering the whole of the south of the country, as well as the eastern region of Donbass.
Now on BBC World News, Hard Talk asks tough questions in interviews with people who are shaping the news.
Welcome to Hard Talk. I'm Stephen Sand. Security. My guest is the former Russian oligarch turned arch-Putin foe, Mikhail Khodorkovsky. If Putin is cornered, how will he respond? Western leaders say that Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine must fail. Do you think they understand what it will take to ensure that Putin
считает своей победой, и это была его ошибка. Он объявил, что фактически он хочет сменить власть в Киеве, и это ему не удалось. И с этой точки зрения, конечно, на сегодняшний день.
Right now, do you think is the strongest? You know Putin well. I'd be interested in your answer.
Сегодня Путин считает, что он побеждает и что он способен справиться с теми очевидными, ему придется отступить.
Really? Because there is a school of thought in the West that Putin cannot afford a humiliation in Ukraine, and if he is facing humiliation,
может ли он применить ядерное оружие в Украине? Ну, наверное, может, если западные лидеры будут его уговаривать, что Владимир Владимирович, что бы ты ни сделал в Украине.
Weaponry, perhaps some heavier weaponry than we've seen before, but still nothing like the list that President Zelensky wants of heavy artillery, fighter jets, all sorts of things which he is not getting. As you relate, what is your message to them?
Я им говорю, что они до последнего времени все время опаздывали. Они все время делали тот шаг, который нужно было сделать на месяц раньше. То, что я говорю западным лидерам, это в вашей голове. Путин еще не воюет с НАТО, А в его-то голове, и он об этом говорил много раз, он как раз воюет и с НАТО, и с Соединенными Штатами на территории Украины, или потом вам придется наносить это поражение ему, но уже на территории одной из стран НАТО. Вот в этом на самом деле выбор.
This isn't just about weapons, is it? It's also about the vast amounts of money that the West, particularly the Europeans, send to Russia every single day, every single week, every month of the year in terms of payments for oil and gas. Hundreds of millions of dollars every single
российские энергоносители на российскую нефть и газ. А Путин уже 10 лет назад было ясно, куда он ведет историю. Именно в этот момент нужно было предпринимать шаг, чтобы это давление обнулить.
But we are where we are. The German Chancellor Scholz says that if Germany was to cut off the taps, the gas taps from Russia tomorrow, hundreds of thousands of...
возможностью оплачивать свою агрессию деньгами от поставок нефти и газа. Возможно ли это на сегодняшний день? Может быть...
And let me stop you there, because you are the former boss of Yukos Energy. You were once arguably Russia's richest in oil and gas. How quickly would Putin's war machine and the Russian economy collapse, or at least no longer be able to function in the way it functions today?
Я думаю, что это будет очень серьезным ударом.
In the meantime, what we see as Europe discusses oil and gas, but frankly does very little about it, what we see is some limited sanctions on the banking sector, oligarch. Do you think the seizing of yachts, the telling Roman Abramovich he can no longer own Chelsea Football Club, do all of these big headline measures, do they make any difference?
Это путинские агенты, через которых он оказывает влияние, или во всяком случае имеет возможность оказывать влияние на западную политическую систему. Вот что это именно так. Что это означает? Это означает, что Путин держит их очень крепко в своих руках, и они могут исполнить любую его команду.
Power after Yeltsin. Without you, Putin might have struggled. With you, he was a political force. Do you regret your association with him?
Конечно, я сожалею. Слушайте, я начал сожалеть и в 2001-м. Я воспринимал Путина как нормального человека, продолжателя демократической революции в России.
Do you think he changed, or did you get him wrong at the beginning?
Оказался среди тех людей, которых ему удалось обмануть. Да, я оказался недостаточно проницательным в тот момент. Я об этом сожалею каждый день.
And you obviously paid a very heavy price, not change Russia from outside, but would you accept that what we see today is the failure of your political campaign against Putin?
Вы знаете, что во время войны, потому что он боится тех выступлений, которые могут произойти внутри страны. И это достаточно важный результат. Другое дело, что этого не хватает. Это значит, что нам надо просто больше работать.
I'm sure you undermine Russian security and that Russia has a fundamental right to send its forces into a war which is safeguarding Russian culture.
На самом деле очень мало россиян, кто всерьез боятся НАТО. НАТО для людей в России – это объяснение их боязни выйти на улицу и протестовать против, когда Путин ведет войну в Украине. Ну, с какой стати люди будут на самом деле всерьез относиться к угрозе, что НАТО будет атаковать Россию само по себе?
Open Russia Foundation and other civil society initiatives have failed. Why?
На самом деле внутри российского общества происходили очень заметные и очень серьезные изменения. И в 2000 году, сейчас странно вспоминать, но у меня было ощущение, что еще 10 лет, и Россия станет абсолютно, для которых, во всяком случае, обозначил Владимир Путин, удалось охватить вот такую значительную часть российского населения. У этого есть объективные, конечно, предпосылки. У этого есть предпосылки победы в благополучии в своей жизни. Вот это была наша самая большая ошибка реформаторов, что мы не сумели показать людям в 2000 году: вы почти победили. Ну, с родиной твоих предков. Вам, я не знаю, вы способны ли это почувствовать, но вот для таких людей, как я, вся семья которых в свое время вышла с Украины, но людей, с которыми у меня были очень хорошие отношения, потому что мы просто расходимся по разные стороны баррикад. Стыдно ли мне? Да, мне стыдно. Да, мне стыдно, потому что я не могу каждому украинцу...
Why do you say that?
Потому что российская история показывает, что проигранная война, а Путин с высокой степенью вероятности эту войну все-таки проиграет. Что Украина...
And then what? And then what? You know, what are the alternatives for the Russian people in terms of leadership? Boris Nemtsov, one of the leading opposition politicians, dead. Alexei Navalny, perhaps the biggest, going to be one of Putin's associates? And if so, why should things change?
Я хочу сказать, что это грандиозная ошибка и значительной части россиян и Запада искать человека, реальное местное самоуправление. И сейчас, что меня радует, жители больших городов постепенно это начинают осознавать. Нам не удастся построить единую демократическую Россию. Россия будет многоукладной в политическом.
दादी कहती थी कि स्पेशल खाना दिल से बनता है और दिल की बात सिर्फ पी मार्क जानता है. Pee Mark, the mustard specialist since 1933.
Barso se sarso.
300 million years ago, there was no Africa. There is still a force connecting those divided by distance, reversing millions of years of rifting, making far feel close, bringing there to here.
Over the next couple of days, here it is showing up clearly on the satellite picture. It's got some very heavy snowfall on its northern flank, which again will affect the northern plains of the United States, southern Canada, particularly the Dakotas, which looking at probably having their snowiest April on record, seasonal norm. For Africa, it stays unsettled through equatorial countries, showers and storms here. One feature we are watching is this area of very heavy rain across northern Madagascar into the Mozambique Channel, which could develop into a tropical system over the weekend of China and in towards the Korean Peninsula. Very heavy rainfall affecting northern Queensland could cause some issues by the time the weekend's out. Could see some flooding there. For New Zealand, there will be some sunshine around the weekend, but there is still the threat of rain across southern and western areas.
And let's just remind ourselves, this is all part of the same story.
Piece the story together with Ros Atkins, Outside Source on BBC World News.
Of growing evidence of war crimes in Ukraine and urges both sides to respect international law.
It is horrifying. Just the stories of people, children.
still trapped inside. Meanwhile, in the rest of the country, Russian forces are focusing on new offensives in the eastern region of Donbass, as well as in southern Ukraine. Well, a senior Russian military commander has declared Moscow is aiming to take full control of those.
Russian pictures claim to show rocket launchers firing on ammunition stores. Their forces took 40 villages in Ukraine's eastern regions yesterday, but intelligence assessments say they're pro, with only small numbers of residents able to escape in the last few days.
It is devastating. It is horrifying. Just the stories of people, children, women, men.
In Bucha, near the capital, Kyiv. There is prayer and reflection right across the country in church services as the majority of Ukrainians mark the Easter weekend.
It's not maybe that kind of celebration with defending our country.
This holiday is very important because it means beginning of new things, it means resurrection, and in current context it's even more important. So it's very special for us and for my
weapons, more support to the Ukrainians. Can you tell us more about what you're sending?
Yes, well, like other countries, we now see that this war is in a new phase. And heavier equipment, which is armored vehicles, amongst other things. And we feel it's also important to work together with other countries. So at present we're talking with Germany, and we're very serious into investigating if and how to provide
Ukraine. And would they be the heaviest land warfare systems that any Western ally has sent?
We are looking into right now. We are in the final phase also of talking to our
country to come into NATO territory to have that training, presumably?
Yes, because it is not possible for us to go into Ukraine to do this training. So the training would have to be elsewhere. I think in the longer term. And of course, we don't know how the war is going to develop. But I am very sure that Ukraine will need our support also in the future, in the months and years to come.
So, I mean, it is just heading towards an escalation.
Well, I think we have all to remember that the real escalation happened on the 24th of February, when Putin's illegal invasion has laid out its needs, and it now needs this heavier equipment. And once again, they only have to defend themselves because of this illegal invasion of the Russians.
What can you tell us about any part?
And every war has to end at some point, also by negotiations and by agreeing on terms. But at this very moment, I'm not seeing any positive signs, I'm afraid.
But can you give us an idea of where?
Crimea is also in. We don't recognize the Russian occupation of the Crimea. There has to be a negotiation. There have to be talks. But today, I heard a Russian general announce that their aim was to take at least the whole.
Just finally, if I may, the position of Sweden and Finland, if they are going to be fast-tracked into NATO, again, is that not risking a huge provocation to Moscow?
Well, once again,
so here that overall there isn't a strategy that moves seriously towards talks, and that the West, whilst providing weapons, is just in a position of a military stalemate with Russia. That perhaps neither side will.
It doesn't stop that. You cannot ask from Ukraine nor from its Western partners that they decide to stop the war and just to concede to Russia. I think that is, you must look the other way.
The UK and India have signed a new defence partnership, with India including cooperation on fighter jet technology. The agreement was made during the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson's visit to India, where he met with his counterpart Narendra Modi.
And we have decided to make all efforts to conclude the FTA by the end of this year. In the last few months, we have concluded free trade.
So much potential for us to take our trade and investment to a whole new level. On this visit alone, we've secured new deals worth £1 billion, creating more than 11,000 jobs.
From Delhi.
India has chosen to remain neutral when it comes to what's going on in Ukraine, although we did get some insight about the conversations that the two leaders had about what was going on in Ukraine and about their positions toward lecture India on its position. But the Prime Minister was asked about this in the news conference that he held just now, and he did say that India did strongly repeat its condemnation of the atrocities that happened in Bucha. India had also talked
बीमाक मस्टर्ड ऑयल मस्टर्ड स्पेशलिस्ट द्वारा बनाया गया करोड़ों द्वारा जांचा परखा आजमाया गया द मस्टर्ड स्पेशलिस्ट सिंस 1933 बरसों से सरसों
पड़ता है खिंडिया
Here on BBC World News.
This is BBC World News. The latest headlines. Warnings from the UN military commanders declare their aim of taking the whole Donbass. Now, Emmanuel Macron and his rival Marine Le Pen of Figeac, and we've been getting some live shots also of him in the crowd. These were recorded a bit earlier, I think. Well, he claimed his rival was trying to disguise what he called her extreme right platform. Le Pen, who's due to speak, can you just tell us overall, when people look at this from around the world, there's obviously a certain degree of alarm at the rise of a far-right candidate, where they are getting almost 50% potentially of the vote.
Everyone. She speaks about the people. She speaks about their problems. She speaks about inflation. She speaks about their cars and their day life. And actually, people listen to her and they vote for her. And
some have seen him to be politically perhaps a bit elitist, a bit out of touch. He's been obviously very focused on the Ukraine crisis in recent weeks. How has he shaped up in these last few crunch days when perhaps people are making their mind up?
He actually, those last few days, he was really in his campaign. And the TV show, the debates, a few days ago, he was really in it. And he actually, well, for the people.
Where those votes are going to go? What information reliably do we have?
The last polls, because we have polls also here in France until tonight. The last polls show that he has a big advance. We go out and vote on Sunday. It is the big question here, because as the polls are so high for Emmanuel Macron, young voters, for example, they're kind of, they don't know actually what they're going to do. Because
the Russia factor, Le Pen's previous ties, Macron said that Moscow is her banker. Has that been damaging?
She quite defended herself well on Wednesday. She has shown herself very much in front of Putin, and he has well managed Ukraine for the French people. So it is a very big weakness for her, and it shows that she has no experience.
Thanks indeed. Now, the former Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan, ousted from office earlier this month, has been holding large rallies refusing to accept the new government and demanding fresh elections. Sukun Kamani reports.
A recent trip to Moscow, and in doing so, he's really tapping into a reservoir of popular anti-Western sentiment here.
Why is America so concerned that we are having good relationship with Russia and China? That is the main thing which is pinching.
Dismiss those allegations. Most independent analysts that I've spoken to don't believe them either. They say Imran Khan is deliberately, they believe, exaggerating the contents of a diplomatic cable sent by the Pakistani ambassador in Washington. They say evidence of a conspiracy. Instead, they say Imran Khan fell out with his former ally, Pakistan's powerful military, and that's what's led to his downfall. Now, the new government here, which of course would deny allegations made by Imran Khan, and they aren't due to take place until next year.
Sukunda Kamani there. The world's most powerful particle accelerator, the Large Hadron Collider, has begun the process of restarting after 3 years of being shut down for improvements. Scientists, which sits on the Swiss-French border, could forever change our understanding of the universe. It's quite an extraordinary place. You can go and visit, which I was lucky enough to do last time it was open. We're back very soon. This is BBC News. Thanks for watching.
Also, satellite picture reveals these thunderclouds which have been building up across central southern areas and across into the northeast. Some really powerful ones here which have brought large hail, frequent lightning, some localised flooding. Now, these dangerous storms are likely to continue into the weekend. Into Central Asia, there's warmth building as well, but some showery bursts of rain. We've got this weather front which is spreading its way eastwards. That will bring a drop in temperature for the likes of Tashkent for a while this weekend. But the heat is building across parts of Iran and in towards the Middle East there.
To make sure you have the facts, and that's where experience counts. Having a global view really makes a difference, and shining a light on stories across the world gives our viewers another perspective.
That wishful thinking.
Are companies doing enough to make a stand against Russia? I get the view from the man behind the list on corporate action and inaction. I also speak to the boss of Ukraine's top energy firm about restrictions.
This is BBC World News, the headlines. The UN Human Rights Office says there's growing evidence of war crimes in Ukraine, including the murder of at least 50 civilians during the Russian occupation of Bucha. A Russian general has said the offensive in Ukraine is aimed at Narendra Modi. Health officials in northern Afghanistan say 36 people have been killed in an explosion at a mosque in the city of Kunduz. They say the suicide attack took place at a Sunni mosque during Friday prayers. Those are the headlines.
The metaverse. Well, if you are new to metaverse, well, it's a virtual world where you can imagine to be anyone and be anywhere. So I can even do these dance steps over here, which are a bit embarrassing.
Well, this is the experience hall. Can we walk the stairs?
Sure.
Yeah, this is the experience hall where most of the companies use the platform to launch their products. And this is a screen.
Zoom call, and I must say your avatar doesn't look like you at all.
Well, the application is designed to have avatars which are generic for male and female. They get to choose different attires, but they're not really specific with their facial. Well, we've had people asking us to not just create just a face, but also attire which could go for their marriage functions to having a birthday party.
Yeah. The metaverse. What's the next step from here for this kind of a concept in India?
Well, it's ultimately going to be an immersive experience. You just can't, give a flat experience and call it 3D. Yeah, so that's where it is going towards.
Well, we talk more about it in our conversation, but for now, thank you so much for joining us, Pushpak, and see you somewhere in the real world, perhaps, so we can meet and shake hands for sure.
Definitely. Thank you.
I'm good, Devina. Thanks for having me on the show.
Thank you for joining in. So Rajesh, how far is this future that we're talking about? Just give me a timeline. How far is it?
It is now. In fact, a lot of things that we are talking about.
Invact Metaversity, which is a university on metaverse. Well, welcome, Manish. Thank you for joining us. Could you tell us how this technology will be different from, say, online classrooms that we've seen during the pandemic?
Yeah, Devina, thanks for having me like you're inside the class. And you would have all the benefits of being on campus. We call it attend the campus from your couch.
attend the campus from the couch, so you don't need to wear a uniform for sure. You could just be on your bed and just attend that. In India, you could be sitting in the US and you could have the same kind of educational experience on metaverse. But let me get our third guest in because he is at an interesting intersection. Sai Srinivas, who's CEO and co-founder of Mobile Premier.
See, metaverse is just more than just adding 3 dimensions. I mean, three dimensions has been around for a long time. Like if you put on a video headset or a VR headset, you can very well experience the world in 3 dimensions. I think what's really exciting about multiple different things. In fact, you can have value for a university that you may be building in this virtual universe. I think 3 or 4 years down the line, you would be able to mortgage assets on the digital world, be it digital land, or for that matter, digital items.
Or virtual world. So say you're in a video game where you can actually buy a castle. Or you could buy a fancy looking apartment, which is completely out of range, at least for me in real life. But that is possible in...
Already been created. For example, there's a native token called Mana, which is used in decentral land. There are tokens like Polygon, which are used for buying non-fungible tokens. Axie Infinity is another famous like Bitcoin, Ether, and the others. These can be used to perform the transactions. And those who do not have access to this, they can buy those tokens on any of the cryptocurrency exchange like Binance or Coinbase and participate in this ecosystem.
Interesting. So Manish, in a country like India, where there are multiple challenges, this kind of technology can actually solve a lot of problems. For example, the education sector, where your company is trying to give
device. On the connectivity and bandwidth, we are seeing improvement every quarter. Since the launch of Jio, both the connectivity and the price of the bandwidth has come down. And today, if you look at it, even in rural areas, people do on every quarter. The other thing is, very soon people will realize that just as laptop has become a classroom necessity, a VR device will become a classroom necessity. And most people would want to buy this and allocate their household budget to ensure that their children and about years, we're talking about quarters, and therefore we need to be prepared for that future that is quite imminent at this point in time.
So Jio again is internet service which is provided by the Reliance Industries in India. But coming to you, Sai, and taking from what just been said, that mobile devices or laptops, there were certain families who weren't even able to afford internet packs that are quite cheap in India. Will metaverse then just deepen this digital divide?
I think on that, I agree with Manish, the fact that, data is all. And I think there is a future where, there's going to be some kind of a marriage between a smartphone and a VR device. I don't know if that's going to happen in a quarter, maybe a year, maybe 2 years. But in a country like India, to ask a family to spend, say, 25,000, but I think that would be something that I think would fly.
Yeah, the VR headsets that you're talking about is $300 upwards. And would people have similar kind of experience if they do not have a VR headset? That's also a question, Sai. Will that be a metaverse, or will that be just experiencing an anime?
It enables the customer to choose, do I want to spend more and do this, or am I comfortable watching this on a simple 2-dimensional screen and be okay? But the choice is the most important thing.
Let's get the person who's trying to build the infrastructure around it as well. So Rajesh, what's your view on
these extra devices and the hardware? But for an augmented reality where everything is renditioned on a 3-dimensional plane, you don't need those devices. According to me, metaverse will take off, participate in this revolution called metaverse. But with the prices of smartphones dropping and more service providers enabling metaverse on mobile first and on a web interface, will be able to address some.
The person you are interacting with in this kind of universe is genuine. Is there an inbuilt verification system that metaverse comes with, or more needs to be done?
Yeah, it all depends on in terms of how quick. For that to happen, we need to have those kind of infrastructures to come in place. And metaverse is moving towards that particular direction. In addition to that, obviously, some of the fundamental factors that still remain.
All right. But Manish, here's a question. This challenge compounds when you talk about building an environment for children to interact in.
The way we think about this is that we need to give control to the user to define what is safe for them.
Countries like South Korea are way ahead because Zepeto is a virtual world or metaverse created by NaverZ Corporation, where you can use that platform for social gatherings. You can also shop for popular brands, metaverse. So is regulation possible in this world, and is it also needed in your view, Sai?
Oh, thank you for that question. I think, I think India has always been very, very smart when it comes to a wait and watch approach. I think sometimes over-regulation or unnecessarily regulating an industry before the industry is ready is also a bad idea. So the right thing to do is to just wait and watch and then pick what's the right thing to do. And for all you know, you might not need a regulation. Maybe the existing...
Give ourselves maybe about 6 months to 12 months for the code of practice to evolve. And once the code of practice has evolved, and if there's still gaps, then those gaps may be addressed through underlying...
allow them to choose their avatars, it could lead to personal values around body image again being eroded.
Yeah, but who are we to decide what is right for someone or what is not right for someone? So we would have to give them that choice and they would then choose. Sometimes I would like to sort of be a mountaineer. So you can choose the day and you can decide when are you your creative best. Okay. And I would love to have that choice because in the physical world, I do not have the choice. I have to face the world in whatever shape and format I have been given.
Different avatars depending upon the avenues where you would like to use them. So from that perspective, as far as my avatar is concerned, I don't think it will be completely in divergence to my real self.
Bird or a whale, one of these two things. Right?
Bird or a whale?
I think, I'm kind of torn between these two. But yeah, but if I make up my mind, I'll let you know. But right now I'm torn between these two. I mean, that's the beauty of a digital world, right?
Young people who could be hooked in this metaverse for a long time to lose track of what's real and what's not.
No, I mean, see, the thing with anything and any technology is that, there's always a situation or there are always data, it's important that we wait and watch and we see, and wherever the chances that it can go wrong or it can go sideways, we ensure that we keep curbs in place to protect ourselves and our communities.
Well, I'm seeing the world coming back as we For me, I think I'll just change my hair color to pink. Mainly because I'm not allowed to have pink hair on the show. So I'd like to change my hair color to pink. But well, thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us. It's been a great and a fascinating conversation.
Thank you, Devina.
Cities are endless, but there are also concerns around cybersecurity and personal safety, which will need to be addressed. So where do you think the metaverse will lead us? Let us know about your ideas and possible digital avatars and Del from Devina.
ज़मीन हर तरफ छाए हैं हम ये ऐसी कूल है अपनी कहानी झिल करके जीनी जवानी चलने दे बस दिल की मन.
There with severe weather over the next couple of days. South America looks pretty unsettled across southern areas. For southern Chile, it stays very wet and windy, but we'll see some sunshine returning to Patagonia. Areas of low pressure have been sweeping up from the southwest, another one which will rain and strong winds. Some very wet weather likely through central southeast Africa, and concerns of tropical development in the Mozambique Channel during this weekend. Some showers and thunderstorms popping up across parts of the Middle East, around central northern Saudi and India in towards southern Pakistan. Big thunderstorms breaking out for southern India and into the northeast of India for Bangladesh too. These could be pretty violent. This weather front will bring further wet weather to the southeast of China, stretching across into southern Japan on Sunday.
It's being revealed.
These people have been escaping from cities that have been under Russian bombardment.
The damage here gives a sense of how fierce the fighting has been.
They're still discovering dead bodies here in Bucha.
See the headlines as they happen with breaking news. Hello, I'm Ross Atkins with Outside Source. This is the extraordinary story of climate change. Vaccines for Ukraine. Let's look at some of the international reaction. Tell us what you've been hearing. In practical terms, what does that mean? And let's just remind ourselves, this is all part of the same story.
Piece the story together.
This is BBC World News. I'm Geetha Gurumuthy. Our top stories. A senior Russian military commander has said the goal of the Ukraine offensive is Russian fighters declare victory in the port city of Mariupol, where satellite imagery appears to show recently dug mass graves. The UN warns of growing evidence of war crimes in Ukraine and urges both sides to respect international law. Peace and a defence and security partnership with India. Plus, the great switch on. Scientists in Switzerland restart the Large Hadron Collider after it was closed for an upgrade for more than 3 years. Hello, welcome to BBC World News. As the bloody war there as a horror story of violations against civilians. Both sides, it said, stand accused of tossing aside respect for international law. Well, the UN monitoring mission in Ukraine has documented the unlawful killing of 50 civilians, focusing on new offensives in the eastern region of Donbass, as well as southern Ukraine. A senior Russian military commander has declared Moscow is aiming to take full control of those areas as part of the second phase of what it calls its special military operation.
Stores. Their forces took 40 villages in Ukraine's eastern regions yesterday, but intelligence assessments say their progress is limited, and Ukraine claims their gains are only temporary. Russia also wants
people, children, women, men, elderly, getting murdered, raped. And this is just continuing. It's just another day. The story has not changed at all.
Services as the majority of Ukrainians mark the Easter weekend.
It's not maybe that kind of celebration like we used to have in the past, but it's a time where we can be together with our family.
Even more important, so it's very special for us and for my family as well.
Sandbagged churches are a reminder that nowhere here is safe and that peace this Easter will be hard to find. Dan Johnson, BBC News, Lviv.
Phase, and that means we have to make new efforts to help Ukraine to defend itself. I think so far the EU and the NATO have showed great unity, and lots of countries have stepped up. And so have we. We have decided to send heavier equipment.
So can you confirm that the Netherlands is transferring some of its German-built howitzers to Ukraine? And would they be the heaviest land warfare systems that any Western ally has sent?
We are looking into right now, but it takes time.
Ukrainians would have to leave their country to come into NATO territory to have that training, presumably.
Yes, because it is not possible for us to go into Ukraine to do this training, so the training would have to be elsewhere. I think it's important to take these steps. We do help with material weapons that can be used right away, but we also have to think in the longer term. And of course, we don't know how the
30 people have been killed and dozens injured in an explosion at a mosque in the province of Kunduz. Well, officials said the blast happened during Friday prayers. Unverified pictures on social media showed damaged walls and the ceiling of a building there. I'm joined by Zia Shraher from BBC Persian. Zia, what more do we know about this?
It's happened in the last few hours, just after the Friday prayers in the local time in the northeastern province. They have finished their Friday prayers. They were chanting and kind of holding their own way of ceremony, and the attack has happened during this time. It's not clear whether it was a suicide attack or a explosive. So far, 33 people have been confirmed to be killed in the attack, and 43 people have been injured. And we don't know who is behind the attack, but there is a strong speculation that probably ISIS, who's
relationship, as far as we know, between the Taliban authorities, the old remnants of Al-Qaeda and IS? Because we know that people have moved between all these militant groups.
It's a very complicated question. The Taliban were the group who think with them, so their relationship is a bit clear. They're fighting each other, although some of the Taliban groups are sort of accused to be connected to ISIS.
And what are IS trying to achieve?
Creating an Islamic state, in Islamic state of Khorasan, because it's called ISIS-K, ISIS Khorasan, so that includes Afghanistan and Pakistan. That's what they're saying. But these are different groups who are have different agendas.
Zia Shraher, thank you so much for joining us. Thanks from BBC Persian, thank you. Now, campaigning in the French presidential election is on its final stretch before Sunday's vote. Opinion polls suggest Emmanuel Macron still has the upper hand of these two candidates as we head into polling day.
Well, the position is that Emmanuel Macron does seem to have pulled ahead in the opinion polls. Just under 2 weeks ago, they were almost neck and neck. One later today, but in the meantime, the Macron camp has plenty of room to feel comfortable, if not at all complacent.
And Le Pen has tried to soften her image, but within her
is to do with trying to move away from purely talking about immigration, talking about law and order, and instead appealing to ordinary French people, talking a great deal about the cost of living crisis that's hitting so many people in Europe, partly because of Ukraine, partly because of one of her signature policies that she's proposing is to ban the wearing of the headscarf by Muslim women in public places. This was a big bone of contention in the debate that she had with Emmanuel, but she's also proposing to have a referendum on giving French citizens rights over others in the fields of housing, of jobs, and of welfare, and that would then put
too elitist, too aloof, perhaps, although he's obviously trying to pull back from that in these last few hours.
It's a very good question. They each have core support, of course, but they're fighting very hard to try and get some of those people to back them. But there is quite a strong level of antipathy towards both candidates in this country. People who look at Macron, who of course...
More to come. Britain's Prime Minister Boris Johnson, on a visit to Delhi, signs a defence and security partnership with India.
It was over 70%. You know how many seats your party got? Zero, Mrs.
We failed to win seats, but we got more votes than previous election.
It's a risk you're taking.
I take risks every day.
The reason you haven't divorced is that you simply can't afford it. You're right about that.
Aiming to complete a bilateral free trade deal, as well as a new initiative to tackle climate change. Here's what they had to say.
The teams of both our countries are working on the free trade agreement. There has been good progress in our negotiations.
Potential for us to take our trade and investment to a whole new level. On this visit alone, we've secured new deals worth £1 billion, creating more than 11,000 jobs, and perhaps most significant...
Correspondent Rajini Vaidyanathan is following the visit from Delhi.
Well, Boris Johnson might be feeling the heat back home in the UK over the Partygate scandal, but here in India he's had a very warm welcome. Union flags are flying outside Parliament here behind me. Prime Minister welcoming him here, and as he spoke to reporters earlier today, Boris Johnson said that looking at those billboards made him feel a bit like India's superstar cricketer Sachin Tendulkar. Now, Boris Johnson described his Indian counterpart Narendra Modi. One area where they don't completely see eye to eye is the war in Ukraine. Now, India has consistently retained a neutral stance on this, and it has refused so far to outright condemn the Russian invasion. Now, the issue inevitably came up, Ukraine, and that Mr. Modi said that he had intervened with Vladimir Putin several times and that he told him he wanted Russia to stop hostilities. So that is significant because aside from the statements that we get from Boris Johnson, the other key area that was big for both leaders was, of course, making progress when it comes to getting a trade deal. And both leaders have been very optimistic, saying that they hope a trade agreement can come close to fruition, but optimistic with the progress they've made during these two-day talks. And they say that, for example, some of the tariffs that both nations have a problem with have now been ironed out. So there is some progress, but let's see what happens later this year and whether a free trade agreement
machine will be able to detect new particles and start a physics revolution that could forever change our understanding of the universe. Our science correspondent, Palab Ghosh, reports.
So it's like a medieval castle. You had to have the
collider
of the beam.
So this is the first time I'll have seen the detector, and wow, it just looks incredible. 7,000 tons of intricate engineering built to detect minute particles created by atoms, completely new to science. And if it does, it could transform our understanding of the universe.
We are looking actively for a lot of new phenomena. Dark matter, for example, we can look that.
We've done since the startup of the LHC, the last 10 years, we'll be able to actually get the same amount of data in the next 3 years as we did in those 10 years.
The particles that are created are going in every direction.
The researchers here are excited at the Large Hadron Collider on the Swiss-French border.
Well worth a visit if you are nearby. I took my kids a few years ago. They absolutely loved it. We are back in a few minutes with the headlines. Thanks for joining us. This is BBC World News.
Central southern areas and across into the northeast, some really powerful ones here which have brought large hail, frequent lightning, some localised flooding. Now these dangerous storms are likely to continue into the weekend as well. Temperatures meanwhile will be really building across northern and northwest of the lights of Tashkent for a while this weekend, but the heat is building across parts of Iran and in towards the Middle East there. It stays very hot across northwest India. Temperatures at 42 degrees there, Nagpur, on Saturday afternoon. As we drift towards the south here, we'll see the temperatures drop a little bit. So that front works its way through and then it warms up into next week.
दादी कहती थी कि स्पेशल खाना दिल से बनता है बरसों से सरसों.
Muya was a hell.
Behind every headline,
I had this feeling that I'm entering a prison.
there is a human story.
Kenya.
This is our world.
I just seen the cat. I also speak to the boss of Ukraine's top energy firm about restricting the flow of gas funds to Russia. Join me, Aaron Heselhurst, on Talking Business Weekly, here on BBC World News.
In Myanmar, we go.
Or President Le Pen. They're offering very different visions of France's future, but many voters say it's a choice between cholera and the plague. Stay with us this week as France decides, here on BBC World News.
Reform. Africa will always remain important for me, and so I will continue doing what I do.
Most people are not going to judge 2022 by what Trump said. They're going to judge based on life in America.
Lohan follows Samoa's first female leader, Fiame Naomi Mataafa, to ask whether female leaders in the most climate-vulnerable region in the world can save their people.
We are drowning, and our only hope is the life ring you are holding.
The Western world is responsible for 76% of carbon emissions.
You don't need my pain.
One gets to make choices about life and death. We here are privileged today to do exactly that.
What's happening here is a bellwether of the planet's future.
As the world met for the COP26 in Glasgow in 2021, I travelled to the Pacific Islands to meet women leading the fight against the climate crisis. Female Prime Minister.
There's very low emissions from the Pacific, and yet we are most impacted.
Who carries the expectations of a generation of young women looking for representation.
If we recall the COP in Paris, that's where there was a special call for leaders to come to the COP. You know, it was quite an effort of, you know, where climate change is at.
We have to adapt. We have to go down that path. Alternative is unthinkable.
As one of the largest islands in the Pacific, being relocated and rebuilt further up in the highlands.
It's okay.
Whilst the new village is finished, Litty told me that many of the villagers still return to the caves that offered them shelter from previous storms.
Stove, bed, all the clothes, lose it when the hurricane come, yeah?
Everybody just got and left?
Yeah, because the water come through the house. I can't do anything because we are afraid.
Their land in the Pacific Islands, but relocation is only going to become more common with more climate-induced disasters.
Can we go back to our home islands with nothing? And for my country...
Jenna is a poet and the daughter of the former president Hilda Heine.
Yes, I can hear you.
She'll be attending the COP26 as part of the island's delegation this year.
Dear Mata Filipinum.
In 2014, she captured a globe. Now 7 years old, her daughter Painum is still facing the same threats that her mum and grandmother are fighting.
I am transitioning from this poetry creative side to exactly what you focus on now, which is the kind of more practical.
Hello, Senator Heine, how are you? In terms of the Marshall Islands right now and climate change, do you think adaptation is possible?
The government is working on our adaptation plan and looking at
refugees, about actually moving people right now.
For us, we have 24 islands with communities. And so if we were to build up islands, which island can we build up? Because we cannot afford to build up all. These are really hard questions. I personally, would like to see my my granddaughter continue to live in the Marshall Islands and have the same opportunities
A large part of the negotiations of COP26 were on how to mitigate global warming to 1.5 degrees. But in Samoa and the Pacific, there's an...
Moving. Perhaps we didn't give it the name climate change, but we saw the impacts. It's very sad that for us in the Pacific, there's very low emissions from the Pacific. There is significant impact of the sea rise, even to the extent where the sovereignty of nations, because their land is literally going under the water.
वही स्वाद नया अंदाज अमूल चीज ये मेरा चीज है.
Hello, I'm Ross Atkins with Outside Source. This is the extraordinary story of climate change. Vaccines, Ukraine. Let's look at some of the international reaction. Tell us what you've been hearing. In practical terms, what does that mean? And let's just remind ourselves, this is all part of the same story.
Piece the story together with Ross Atkins.
FIA is launching her country's own climate policy as part of Samoa's efforts to meet the Paris Agreement. A key part of it will be on access.
Yeah, the world community is meeting in Glasgow, Scotland, for the COP26. And one of the things that they hope to achieve the climate change challenge and the commitments that countries will make. This is the indication of our commitment to climate change, and
We do not want that dreaded death sentence, and we've come here today to say, try harder, try harder.
In Glasgow, Kathy Jetnell-Kidgener.
Several billions. And so the financing that we need is a scale in which we can't meet, and we didn't cause any of it, so we shouldn't have to pay a single cent for it.
It's now my pleasure to introduce Tina Stege, the climate envoy of...
And so we understand, as do all of our brothers and sisters in the Pacific and in islands around the world, the stakes of this fight.
Progress on all of these issues, Prime Minister. And the final thing I want to say to you is that my team and I are straining every sinew to ensure that what we are able to say with credibility at the end of COP26 is that we have...
The common time frame is the only outcome aligned with the ambition mechanism of the Paris Agreement. Remember, we are negotiating for the survival of our islands.
Panicking. My family and I are really panicking on when I look at my 3-year-old sister Eunice, I question what will be her future look like if Faith and I don't do something now, raising awareness, sounding
in the Pacific Islands that are speaking up about climate change.
The Prime Minister of Samoa gives young girls my age and older women, that chance to be leaders. The upcoming generations. As a teen climate activist and as a girl, a young lady, I also get criticized and discriminated by men because they want. Yes, it really affects women and girls.
One of the projects Anne-Marie has started with friends is a mangrove planting group. They've been responsible for planting over 10,000 mangroves. A mangrove is a shrub that grows in salty water terrain, and it's special because it has these meshed up roots, which mean that it acts as a buffer to the sea. They also help suck up over 6 billion tons of carbon from the atmosphere annually.
So mangroves are the real eco-heroes and the eco-champs. This is all the mangroves that we planted back into. Here in Fiji, we can't leave our classrooms to go for a march or a strike or for some reasons. So this is our way of striking for the government to relook at their plans and to continue to walk the talk. And that's really important. And if one thing that I've learned in my 3 years of activism is that you cannot allow anyone to walk your talk.
Climate change disproportionately affects women, especially those from
be thinking about a political career, but that they continue and especially demonstrate leadership, in whichever area or sector that they are active in, and perhaps somewhere down the line, they
what you can see, and that's the case in Samoa as well. The women's minister's a man.
Yeah. Well, I don't necessarily have a problem with men being ministers, whether for women, because we've had a few. In fact, I think I've been the only woman minister for women. As long as they are able to, recognize, the policy, I think that's the important thing. And, given that there's so many more men in our parliaments and governments, it's so important, to get the message through to the male leadership as well. So bring those extremes, to come to a middle ground. With the COVID, we've seen such a strong collaboration. That's a very clear example and demonstration.
Failure will be obvious.
Hearing no objections, it is so decided.
दादी कहती थी कि स्पेशल खाना दिल से बनता है और दिल की बात सिर्फ पी मार्क जानता है. Pee Mark, the mustard specialist since 1933. बरसों से सरसों.
I'm a creator, and I think when you spend 30 plus years doing wedding gowns, you sort of have to change it up a little bit. I just thought you have to give brides a certain freedom, and there were no rules for me. And I just said, you know what? I want girls to have a choice. If they want to wear a mini or if they want to wear a bathing suit. It's not about that, it's about who they are.
Hello there. There's more disruptive weather on the way to end the working week and as we head into the weekend across parts of central northern United States and southern Canada because of this new area of low pressure, which is bringing further very heavy snowfall across the northern plains. Again, the Dakotas seeing another dumping of snow, perhaps making it one of the snowiest and windy. But we'll see some sunshine returning to Patagonia. Areas of low pressure have been sweeping up from the southwest. Another one which will leave the Iberian Peninsula on Saturday will push across much of Central Europe on Sunday to bring below par temperatures during this weekend. Some showers and thunderstorms popping up across parts of the Middle East around central northern Saudi, perhaps up into Iraq for a while, but temperatures will be building generally across much of the Middle East and down in towards Afghanistan and Central Asia.